Okay, so the topic of the class today is supposed to be about the origins and laws of the Mishaber prayer. But those of you that have come to my class before know that I don't always stick to my topic very precisely. It's loosely related to the topic, but as I prepare it, sometimes I find different discussions. Oh, okay, I apologize. Because I have to give the topic 2 days in advance. So I think I'm going to talk about that. And, as it happens, sometimes I wander off, but it's more or less. Okay, so it's based, of course, on this week's Parsha, Parshas Beha'aloischa, where we find that Miriam speaks about her brother Moshe Rabbeinu. Aaron is also involved, and in the end, Miriam gets tzara'as. And Aaron approaches Moshe, his brother, to daven for their sister. And the pasuk says, let me actually bring up the pasuk here so I can quote it properly. Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem lemor. Moshe cried out to Hashem, saying, Kelna, please Hashem, Refa Nola, heal her. No, the second no they translate as quickly. Please Hashem, heal her quickly. That's it. That's the extent of his prayer. So first of all, the commentaries discuss what is this word lemor. Moshe cried out to Hashem lemor. What does he mean by lemor? Lemor normally means to say. By Daber Hashem on Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe that Moshe should say it. He should teach the Jewish people, like they taught us in Cheder, Azoy zu sagen, in Yiddish. This is what you should say. So, here Moshe is speaking to Hashem. So what does he mean by lemor exactly? So Rashi brings that he asked Hashem to answer him. Normally, we don't know if our prayer is accepted until it's either fulfilled or not fulfilled, or maybe fulfilled who knows how long later. Moshe Rabbeinu, who had, of course, a very open dialogue with Hashem, asked Hashem to answer lemor, to respond and say if he was going to heal Miriam or not. Another interpretation is that lemor is because Moshe Rabbeinu knew that the malcontents, the people who are upset, they'll always have something bad to say. So they'll say, if Moshe doesn't daven, of course he was going to daven anyway, but especially if he wouldn't daven, they would say, oh, you see, he's angry at his sister. He's nakama. He's taking nakama. He's not davening for her. So lemor means towards those that speak. Lamed is two. Omer is like those that say. Towards those that speak. He davened right away because he didn't want people to say that he had anything personal against her. Another pshat, the Or HaChaim says, is that before he davened, he first spoke other words of forgiveness. He first forgave her for her speaking against him, so that his davening would be accepted better, because she would be free of that sin. And finally, Rabbeinu Bachai explains that even though Hashem knows everything, he knows what's in our thoughts, nevertheless, Moshe Rabbeinu davened speaking, lemor. He spoke his tefillah. He didn't just think it. And the reason for that is when you speak your tefillah, so the actual sound of the letters and the words and the sentences, they form an energy together with the ruach, right, the wind that comes out of your mouth, and the actual voice, actual sound of the vocal cords, and the klei hadibur, the actual organs of speech. They form an energy, and those letters and words, they go up to Hashem, and they can be more effective. The angels, whatever it is that, however the system of prayers work, when you actually enunciate them, it creates a more powerful prayer. So as far as why Moshe Rabbeinu prayed such a small prayer, very, very, just 5 words. So Rashi explains 2 reasons. First of all, people shouldn't say that he was davening at length when his sister was in pain. And second of all, they shouldn't say that Moshe Rabbeinu only davens long for his sister. He doesn't daven long for us. Of course, anybody who said that would have a very short memory, because not long ago, Moshe Rabbeinu spent 40 days and 40 nights davening to save the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf. But nevertheless, people do have short memories, and he didn't want them to say anything, so he davened short. Sure. Well, right. First of all, they say 3 is a crowd. So Moshe was there, Aaron was there, Miriam was there, as we're going to see later. So, word gets out. And besides the fact that they were in the oil moed, Hashem had called them, and until they come out, however long they spend in there, people will wonder what's going on. They might ask, and they might be answered. Besides the fact that maybe Moshe Rabbeinu had a clue that this might be written up and put into the most popular and best-selling book of all time, the Bible. And then everybody would know. No. Some say he wrote it as he went along. There's 2 opinions about it. Some say he only wrote it at the end. Before he passed away, he wrote it all up and that's it. Some say he wrote it and he attached it piece by piece. And then at the end, he just finished it off. So, in any case, speaking of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Gemara says a story that Rabbi Lazar in the shul where Rabbi Lazar davened, a chazan once davened very long. In those days, the text of the prayers was not so fixed. So a chazan could kind of add and, say things as it came to him. Anyway, so one of his students complained, and Rabbi Lazar said, he didn't daven longer than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu davened for 40 days and 40 nights. Another time, one of the students davened very short, and another student complained. So he said, he didn't daven shorter than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu only davened 5 words, so he's not less than Moshe. The bottom line is, as long as you mean it and you're sincere and so on and so forth, that's the main thing. Of course, now we have a siddur and we're told what to daven and so on, but nevertheless, the main thing is the kavanah, not how much you say. So that same Gemara, which is Brachas 34a, says that a person, when he's davening for a sick person, does not have to mention the sick person's name. That's what the Gemara says. How do we learn this? From Miriam. Kel na, refana la. It doesn't say Miriam. Even though some of the commentaries point out, I took a picture and have it on my phone, that there is a gematria here, as there usually is. There is a gematria here in, I think it's refana la, is the same gematria as Miriam Yocheved, which is her name and her mother's name. I didn't count it out, but that's what I read in a Sefer Megadim Chadashim. So, but in any case, he certainly didn't say it explicitly. So that's what the Gemara says. You don't have to mention the name. Now, some say it just means you don't have to mention the name, and some say it means you actually should not mention the name, because maybe saying the name is going to cause some kind of judgment about the person. Simply going to check them out and so on. So let's discuss this a little bit. What are these opinions based on, and how do we actually rule? So the Ben Ish Chai brings different Gemaras where we see that people specifically davened with the person's name, using the person's name during their prayer. For example, there's a famous Gemara, which I actually did not get a chance to look up, so you'll forgive me, but I'm going to look it up right now. And it's about one of the Chachamim who was, perhaps was not so respectful. There was another one of the Chachamim, I don't remember what it was. I think it was Rabbi Yossi ben Drumaskis. And he had a punishment, and his eyes came out of their sockets. Very serious punishment.
As a result of not being polite to his.
Exactly.
So similar to Miriam.
Right. Except it was a different punishment, but yes. So, trying to find it. So basically, he quoted a teaching. I mean, he didn't really. It's not so clear what he did so bad, but he quoted a teaching as if it was new, when in fact, Rabbi Elazar. Generally, you don't mess with Rabbi Elazar. He was a very serious rabbi. So gotta find it, quote it properly. Yes, Rabbi Eliezer. Sorry. So he quoted a halacha as if it was a new halacha. In fact, he said this. I received this halacha. Rabbi Eliezer corrected him. He said I received it from my teacher, Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. I heard it from his teacher, all the way halacha al-Moshe Sinai. So for the chutzpah that he ascribed the halacha to that generation, when it really went all the back to Moshe Sinai, his eyes came out, popped out into his hands. Anyway, then Rabbi Eliezer calmed down, and he davened for him, and he said, Yehi rotzen sheyachzeru einei Yossi limkoimon. May the eyes of Yossi go back to their place, v'chazru, and that's what happened. Okay, so you'll say, well, maybe, okay, he mentioned his name, big deal. But we see other Gemaras where the names are mentioned. The Gemara says that Rav Mani once approached his teacher, Rav Yitzchak ben Elyashiv. And he was upset that his wife was not very attractive. So, of course, the question is, he chose her. Nobody forced him. But I don't know, maybe it's an arranged marriage. Maybe she was very young when he married her, and then she, whatever. Anyway, Rav Yitzchak said, what's her name? So he said her name is Chana. So he davened, only two words, Tisyapi Chana. May Chana become beautiful. And so it was. But the problem is that she became so beautiful that she kind of looked down on her husband, like, why am I married to this schlepper for him? I'm so special. And the Shalom Bayis went down. So he said to his Rebbe, things are not so peaceful in the house anymore. So Rav Yitzchak said, if that's the case, Tachzir Chana l'shachrarusa. She should go back to her, literally blackness, but dimness, to her being not so special, in her looks at least. Anyway, it's an interesting Gemara, but without getting into the details of that Gemara, the fact is he asked, what's her name? And he davened using the name. And another Gemara. I'm sorry, not the parents' name, right? That's true. In all of these examples that I'm giving, I don't know if there's even one that has the parent's name. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the poskim say if you don't know the parent's name, you just daven with you just say the name. If you don't know the mother's name, you say the father's name. And if you don't know either, surname, I don't know. That I didn't say. But if you don't know either, you just say the name. Not like people who say Ben Sora or Bas Sora. I mean, his mother's name is not Sora. Ger and a Giyer is one thing. But just because you don't know his name, his doesn't become Bas Sora or Ben Sora. I'm sorry.
So just say the.
Just say the name. If you don't know, in other words, you're supposed to, in general, we're going to learn more about it, but in general, you're supposed to specify your prayers as much as possible, even though the Gemara says not to, but we're going to discuss that. But if you don't know, you specify as much as you can, and that's it. After all, Hashem does know what you're davening for. Hashem knows what's in your heart, but it's always better, it's more effective if you specify. But if you can.
Moshe didn't mention Miriam's name.
Exactly, so we have to figure that out. So, famous stories of Bechanina ben Doisa. Bechanina ben Doisa performed a lot of miracles, even though some of them it's hard to understand why he had to do such miracles. But by him, miracles were just a way of life. It was no big deal. Anyway, somebody came to Bechanina ben Doisa and said, I built my house, I had all my plans, it was approved, and the builder, everything. And then we see that the beams of the roof, they don't reach the end. So now what? I'm going to have to tear it down and put it out. It's a big mess. So Bechanina said, what's your name? And he said, I'm not sure how to pronounce it actually, Aleph Yud Kaf Vav, Iku, I don't know. Iku, okay, may your beams reach. That's it. And they stretched out just like that. So those are all in the Gemara. And in the Zohar, we also find similar things. In the Zohar, Rabbi Yesa once asked a child, a young boy, probably not a child, a young boy who had given a very good Dvar Torah. He said, what's your name? He said, my name is Abba. So he said a prayer. You should be an Abba Bakoil, B'chachma u'b'shanim. You'd be an Abba, like a leader in everything, in wisdom and in years. Similar story, Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi asked a certain fellow Tana who was giving a drasha, and they were very impressed with it. They said, what's your name? He said his name is Chizkiah. So they said, I don't have the Hebrew in front of me right now. Maybe I do actually. Yisyasher chilach v'yistakef araisach. May you have strength and firm Torah. From the word chazak, Chizkiah, chazak. So again, they used the name. They played with the name. In this case, it wasn't just using it to daven with, but they actually gave a bracha based on the name. And in general, we always find that a person is supposed to specify his prayers as much as possible. Even though Hashem knows what we want and what we need and what we're davening for, you're supposed to specify. For example, after the clouds of glory departed, when Aaron passed away, so there was a king that started up with the Jewish people. His name was, I don't remember his name, it was Kanani Melech Arad. What was his name? I don't know if we know his name. Whatever, the king of Arad. He started up with the Jewish people. And he was actually an Amaleki king. And they dressed up as Canaanim because they wanted to confuse the Jewish people. So the Jewish people shouldn't know what to daven for. And in fact, the Jewish people saw that they were dressed like Canaanim, they were speaking Amaleki languages they didn't know, so they just davened in general, Hashem should save us. And Hashem did. But we see that if not for that, they would have specifically davened, Hashem should save us from the Canaani or from the Amaleki. Not knowing what to do, they davened stam, but otherwise they would have davened specifically. So how do we understand all of this? So the Ben Ish Chai explains as follows. When a person is davening for a bracha, so just for a bracha stam, like with the beams or with the, actually it's not going to answer Rabbi Yossi. I'm gonna have a problem with that one. Okay, with the wife and so on, not for an ill person, not for a sick person, a bracha. So then it's proper to use the name because we know that the letters of a person's name, they are actually the keli, they become the vessel for the person's brachas. Even his neshama is somehow contained in the letters of his name. They become the pipeline for that energy to come into him. And the same way when Hashem gives him a bracha, it flows into him through his name. So it's a good thing to mention the name. However, when you daven for a sick person, even if you don't say that he's sick, you just say he should have a refuah shalema, which means implicitly that he is sick and he should get better. Now, if a person is sick, evidently there was a reason that he was sick. Nothing's by accident. Whether it's for an Aveira, whether it's just a tikkun that he needed, whether it's some other Gilgul, a reincarnation, who knows? But he was sick for a reason. So you're mentioning that he was sick. And that almost calls him into a judgment to say, well, he wanted to be healed from being sick. Well, why was he sick? Let's think about it. Maybe he should be healed, maybe not. It's a decision. So in that case, it's better not to mention the name so that you don't call him into being judged again. You just daven, and Hashem knows what you're davening for. And because the name is not mentioned, that doesn't call judgment upon him. Even though you're davening for him and he is sick, but without mentioning the name, it doesn't have that same impact of calling him into judgment. So this answers the beams. It answers Chana, the wife. It's not really, doesn't explain the Kanani because that's not really a bracha. That's just, you're supposed to specify your prayers. But as I'm giving this shir, I realize it doesn't really answer Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi, I mean, it's pretty sick. I mean, to have your eyeballs in your hands, it's pretty serious. So I'm not sure. But nevertheless, this is what the Ben Ish Chai says. The Ben Ish Chai says that if it's for a sickness, you are not supposed to mention the name. If it's for anything else, you mention the name to draw down the bracha. That being said, we still don't understand what happens here every Shabbos, Monday, Thursday, maybe Rosh Chodesh and fast days too. Whenever we take out the Torah, people make a Misha Berach for people that are sick. This one and son of that one and da. What's going on here? Well, we're calling judgment on these people. So here we have the Maharil. The Maharil was one of the later Rishonim. Before the Shulchan Aruch was authored, I don't know exactly what years, probably if I had to guess, I would say 1400s, maybe early 1500s. The Maharil says, so that the whole thing about not using the name is only if you're in the presence of the sick person. If you're in the presence of the sick person, then you should not mention the name. But if you're not, then you should. And there's two ways of understanding this. One way is simple. When you're in the presence of the sick person, it's clear and it's self-evident what you're davening for. You don't have to mention it. You're right there. But another pshat is that we know that the Shechina rests by the sickbed. We read that Yaakov bowed by the head of his bed when he was sick. And Yosef came to visit him, and he asked Yosef to bury him in Canaan, made him swear. Yosef swore, and it says, Vayishtachu Yisrael al roish hamita. He bowed by the head of his bed, or towards the head of his bed. So he's bowing to Hashem, but why? What does it mean towards the head of his bed? So Rashi says that the Shechina is like hovering above the head of the sick person to kind of give him strength and look after him. So when you're davening with the Shechina present, you don't need the angels to help you. It's going straight, so you don't have to explain it so much. When you're davening when he's not there, so that's when you need the angels' help. So you have to specify. So, based on this, we can understand.
I'm a little confused. So Yaakov bowed towards the head of his bed.
He was bowing to Hashem, but he bowed towards the head of his bed because the Shekhinah rests by the head of the person who's sick.
But did he not do that he would have done if the Shekhinah wasn't there?
Maybe he would have bowed somewhere else, towards Yerushalayim, towards the Ma'ariv. I mean, he was bowing to Hashem, but the idea of bowing towards the head of his bed is because that's where the Shekhinah was.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's what he did, was bow.
Right. I mean, he bowed because he was thanking Hashem that he had a son who was going to take care of him. He just wanted to give thanks. But that expression, he bowed to the head of the bed, is because of the Shekhinah being there. So, based on this, we understand a new reason to visit the sick. First of all, the Gemara says, whenever you visit the sick, you take away 1/60th of their illness. Although the Gemara says it's only if you're a Ben Gila, it's only if you're born at the same time. So maybe it doesn't work so well. And also, by the way, it doesn't work if you want to make him better to have 60 people come, because each one takes a 60th of what is left. You understand? Unless you all come at once, but I don't know if there's room in the house.
And everybody has to be the same age.
They have to be this. I think it's born at the same time of the year. I don't think it has to be the same age. I think it has to be born at the same time of the year.
Same season, couple months.
I'm not even sure if it's like a Leo or I really don't know. I'm not sure what the Gemara means. But the simple pshat of that is, I think it says you actually get it. Yeah, that's exactly. That's the downside of it is that you take it with you. You take it away from him, but you take it with you. But in the simple sense of it, the simple sense is that when you visit the sick, you actually see what they need. If there's something that you can do, if maybe they need a reference for a doctor, maybe they need help finding a nurse, maybe they need something very, very simple like feeding them. Like my grandmother should be well, used to take care of a 100-year-old lady, even though my grandmother's almost 90. She used to take care of this old lady, and that was her project. She had no children, and the lady was sick. She was in the hospital, and they called her. She doesn't want to eat, and she doesn't want to eat, and blah blah blah. And she would have literally starved to death if my grandmother hadn't come and made sure they brought her the right food. Had to be mushed, completely mushed, and fed her, spoon-fed her. You know, I mean, she literally saved her life. Otherwise, she would have starved to death because everybody's too busy to take in the particular needs of all the patients. Anyway, so that's the simple pshat, that you heal them because you see what they need. But in addition to that, there's the spiritual component, whatever it means that you take this sickness with you. But in addition to that, we see from this discussion that the tefillah, the prayer that you daven there, is better than if you daven for them anywhere else. Because if you daven for them anywhere else, you're going to have to mention the name. Because that's what it says, you're supposed to mention the name. Now, why? Because otherwise the tefillah is not going to go up and it's not going to be clear and specified. Now, the truth is that when you do that, you are causing some kind of kitrug. You are also calling, him to judgment a little bit, but the benefits outweigh the losses. You have no choice. That's what you do. But if you visit them, you actually are there. You don't have to mention the name, so you can daven in a way that will not affect them negatively at all.
You daven with the chole, or
no. Yeah, I mean, with him if you want, but it doesn't have to be. Just in his presence, you can daven for him. So they explain, this is in the Sefer Megadim Chadashim that I mentioned, which if you want to know who wrote it, I'll tell you very shortly. It's a very modern Sefer by Rabbi David Yoel Weiss, printed within the past 10 years. So he says that based on this, we can explain why it says that Yitzchak davened lenoichach ishtoi. When Yitzchak was davening for his wife that they should have children, It says he davened lenoichach ishto, opposite his wife. Why do they have to be together? I mean, they were both davening. It says they were both davening, but why does it specifically mention he davened opposite her, as if it's important that she was there?
The same tent.
The same tent. Why do they have to be in the same tent? They probably had a few tents. I mean, and even if they were, the fact that the pasuk mentions it means that it was significant. So he suggested this is the concept that he didn't want to mention her name. He wanted to daven for her without mentioning her name. So he davened in her presence. He actually has also a different pshat. He says that because his mother, Sarah's name was changed before she could have a baby, from Sarai to Sarah. So he wasn't sure that maybe his wife's name was also supposed to be changed. And if so, he didn't even know what name to daven with, because he wasn't sure if he was going to change the name, not change the name. So in lieu of the name, he just davened in her presence. But he does bring another pshat, going back to that same story, that he davened in her presence because he didn't want to mention her name and her parents' name, because her parents were not such good people, especially Besuel. We don't really know so much about her mother, but her father was certainly not such a good person. So he didn't want to mention that generation. So therefore he preferred to daven in her presence and not mention the name. So a little bit more about the Misha Berach prayer. So we say, first of all, why do we say the Misha Berach by the Torah? We can daven for the sick at any time, by the way, not any time, but for example, we have a special bracha in Shemona Esrei for the sick, Rafa'inu. And then you have the Shema Koleinu, where you can daven anything you want. Some say it's better to put it into Shema Koleinu. If you're going to mention something that's not in the text of the Siddur, that it's better to put it into Shema Koleinu. Because in the other brachas, there's a certain language you have to use that's more Lashon Rabim, it's for the plural. And in Shema Koleinu, you're allowed to use whatever language. So what's the idea of specifically mentioning it by the Torah? Now, when I say this, I know there's going to be a question that everybody's going to ask, but anyway, this is what it says, so I have to say it. The reason we say it by the Torah is because of a pasuk in Parshas Tazria, I think it is, that v'hatzaru asher boi hanega, the God of Yifrumim b'roisha yiparu al samiyata v'tomei yikra. A person who has saras, he's outside of the camp, so it describes how he's supposed to be with his hair and his clothes, and he should call out, "I'm tamei, I'm tamei." Why is that? So it says because a person who has pain, a person who's in trouble, moidia tsaroi lerabim, he should make the public know of his pain, kadeshi yivakshu olav rachamim, so that they should daven for him. Now, some want to say that this is specifically for a person that has saras. Because a person that has saras, specifically his tefillas are rejected. So perhaps it's only about saras. But others point to different sources where we see, no, that it's even other things, that it's a good thing to inform people so that they can daven for you. So the idea of saying the Misha Berach at the Sefer Torah is that the public should find out, and that way it's not only one person davening, but it's everybody together davening. Which is why what they do in a lot of shuls, I don't want to say most because I haven't made a poll, but in a lot of shuls nowadays, they no longer say the names out loud. Because there's so many names and names, they're piling up. And sometimes the names are old and the people are better, the people are not even in this world anymore. And there's too many names, so they just say it quietly. And they tell everybody, whoever has a name should say it to themselves. It's kind of defeating the purpose of the Misha Berach. I mean, you could always daven to yourself, but the whole point of saying it by the Torah is that everybody's paying attention. and it should become a communal thing instead of a private thing. Anyway, that's just a point that somebody made. Why the mother's name? I actually don't know. To tell you the truth. I know that it is discussed why the mother's name, and there are sources for it, perhaps in the Zohar, but I don't remember. I don't remember exactly.
I associate the father's name more with legal matters, and the mother's name, the mother more with life,
The mother did bring the person into this world, no question, and made the person Jewish too, which is a big part of who they are. But yeah, certainly for legal matters, we use the father's name for any documents or anything like that.
So I'm not clear. Did you say when we say Mishavera in Shul and Shabbos, the Torah, we should include the mother's name or not?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Unless the person is there.
Ah.
I actually remember somebody in my father's shul who's already passed away, and he had cancer, Nebuch, but he still came to shul and he davened, and he was the gabbai. So it was like funny. He was saying Mishabeach for himself, but but the truth is, based on this, he didn't even have to mention his name because he was there. But you could just say Voisi, saying it doesn't have to say his name. That's the point. I'm sorry? Yeah. Oh, that's in the shul? Then? Right. And you don't want to insult him? Is that your question? Yeah. No, I think in that case you should say it. You should say the name, because the whole thing of not saying the name is when you're there in his sick room, so it's clear that you're davening for him. But here you're in shul, it's not clear. So you
want the community to know.
Also, exactly, and you want to tell the people. You want the people to know. If he's there, you don't have to say the name. Hashem is there, and Hashem knows, and that's it.
In regards to Miriam getting tzaras,
Yes. Yes.
I thought the tzaras was the third stage after the walls, then the clothing, then the skin. How did she go directly to the skin?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm going to venture to say that sometimes tzaddikim get instant punishment. No.
They're judging a higher.
Sometimes, like Moshe Rabbeinu, he also got tzaras very quickly on his hand when he said that people aren't going to believe me and whatnot. So sometimes Hashem corrects the tzaddikim right away. So just to go back to the Misha Berach a little bit, you'll notice the Misha Berach that we say for the Cholim includes Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo. Unlike the Misha Berach we say just for the person that gets the Aliyah, which is just Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So just simple, I read that it has to do with the extra merit, sick, and so on. We want all the merit that we can get invested in the bracha. So instead of just mentioning the Avos, we also mention Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo. Why not more? Chizkiah, Mordechai, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's something significant about those people, but I didn't read. So then, of course, everybody knows that there's a separate Misha Berach for men and for women. And I mean, what's the reason for that? Is it not tznius to mention men and women in this? I mean, they're not meeting each other. Just the names are just being mentioned in the same paragraph. But the pshat is, if you read, of course, the text of the Misha Berach for men and the text of the Misha Berach for women, it's actually different. The text of the Misha Berach for men says, "Beramach evorav v'shasa gidav." In his 248 limbs and his 365 sinews, or blood vessels, gidim. Not clear exactly what it is, but in any case, For the women, it doesn't say that. It says, B'chol Eivareh Uv'chol Gideh, in all of her limbs and all of her blood vessels. Why? Because in fact, women do not have 248 limbs. There's different opinions in the Gemara if they have 249, or I think 251 or 252. If I'm not mistaken, those are the three opinions. So that's why we don't say exactly how many, because b'chol, whatever they have. The opinion of 252, by the way, is brought concerning the fact that we have candles by a chuppah. Ner is the gematria 250, and if you add the men's limbs and the women's limbs, 248 and 252, the two candles is 500. So the 248 and 252 is 500. So that's to brighten their, all of their limbs. Anyway, I honestly don't know what limbs we're talking about, because the limb that we're talking about has to have a bone in it. All the limbs in the human body that Chazal enumerated, they're not internal organs like the liver and the heart. They're limbs that have a bone. So I don't know exactly what a woman's bone structure is different than men. I'm not a scientist, but that's what it says in the Gemara. So that's why it's a different Misha Berach. And the question that I have is that in the Chabad Siddur, the Misha Berach on Shabbos does not include any specific prayers, because on Shabbos you're not supposed to daven really for private needs. So instead we just say Misha Berach es so and so, and whoever else. Shabbos himelizik. It's Shabbos, so we don't cry out. Refuah krevalove, the salvation is going to come soon. Like, we don't have to daven. In the merit of the Shabbos itself, they're going to get healed. Amen, that's it. So we say these are the people that need davening, but we're not going to daven. It's Shabbos, and Hashem is going to heal them anyway. So we don't mention all the things, all the things, and the limbs, we don't mention it. So that's why I always wonder that in not all the shuls I've been to, but in most of the shuls that I've been to on Shabbos, they also make a separate Misha Berach for men and for women. I don't know what the point is, because on Shabbos it's the same, because we're not mentioning the limbs, so you may as well put it all together and save a minute or two. Oh, in some shuls they don't say the names? That's interesting.
Is that like factoid? The bone structure of women and men is different.
Uh-huh.
The women's pelvis is a little bit more open.
Uh-huh.
That accommodates for easier childbirth.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Is it true? Men have one less rib? I know they took one out, but I thought maybe there was an extra one in the first place.
But the pelvis is anthropologists, when they do excavations, they can tell.
I see. I see. I see. Interesting. Okay. So, another interesting thing that is not so well known about the Misha Berach that's just to make sure that he gives it, so we can knock on his door in case he doesn't.
Write it down.
That's it. You don't have to say that. I mean, you don't have to say that. If they say it, if they do, it's just because they want to be able to collect. That's all. In most places, they don't say that. It says the name because so and so gives tzedakah, or just that we are giving tzedakah. It says because so and so will give tzedakah. That's interesting. Okay, I have to pay attention. So An interesting point that not many people know is that when you make a Mishaberach, I don't know why it says this specifically about the Mishaberach for Cholim, but this is where it's brought. When you make a Mishaberach for Cholim, you do not give any titles. You don't say my father, my teacher, the great rabbi, the tzaddik, because in front of Hashem there's no titles. Everybody's equal in front of Hashem. It's like, you're telling Hashem that he's honorable. Hashem knows. So, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe was sick after a stroke and so on, I remember Rabbi Groner, the Rebbe's secretary, was, it was like the first public kind of tefillah that they made, and he corrected the person saying the Mishaberach and told him to say the Rebbe's name instead of Adeneinu Reinu Rabbeinu, which was very shocking because the Hasidim never used the Rebbe's name. And even when they called him up for an aliyah, they didn't call him by name. They just said, Adeneinu Reinu Rabbeinu, our master, our teacher, our Rebbe. And that was it. And people were like shocked. But that's what it says. And it's not in the Shulchan Aruch, but it's in the notes of the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Akiva Eger brings it from the Knesset Hagdolah, I think it is, that you're not supposed to give any honorable titles. But they didn't really listen to Rabbi Groner because they couldn't handle it. But technically, that's what it says, that you're not supposed to give those titles. Just to go back a little bit, actually, to what I was saying before about davening the presence of the person. So the Sefer that I mentioned, Magadam Chadashim, explains, according to this, why it was so important that Bilam, when he was trying to curse the Jewish people, be in the presence of the Jewish people. If you look in the Parsha there, Balak is always bringing him to here and to there, and he saw the part of the people, he didn't see all of them, he saw some of them, blah, 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 blah. So if you read the commentaries there, if you read Rashi, what did Bilam have? What was his special power? He knew when Hashem would get angry. And he could slip in a curse just at that second. And the Gemara actually says that there's still a way to tell when Hashem gets angry. And it's theoretically possible to still use Bilam's trick, although it's not recommended. Anyway, but that's such a small instant. Tosfos asks, well, what is he going to say in that small instant? Tosfos says very simple. He's going to say, Kaleim, finish them off. So that's only good if he's in the presence of the Jewish people. He doesn't have to say who he's davening about. But if he's somewhere else, and he doesn't have enough time to mention their names, because in that instant he has to just say whatever he's going to say, he's not going to be able to curse them. So that's why he had to be in their presence. Anyway, that was an interesting point. I don't really have that much more to say, I must admit. My pleasure. It seems that if it's other things, you should mention their name, even in their presence, like we have in some of the stories where the person was there, because that's the way the brachas come down, and it's not going to cause any kitrug on them, so you may as well say it. So it seems.
What about asking Mishaberach for somebody who's not Jewish?
So there's nothing wrong with davening for a person that's not Jewish. It's not forbidden. I mean, presumably not davening for a wicked person, so it's okay. Nothing wrong.
What name do we use?
I believe you're supposed to use the father's name. I read that a long time ago. I don't remember where I read it, but you're supposed to use the father's name.
They don't have a Jewish name, so
Their English name?
it's regular name.
We had in the Stroll of Bell Harbor when I used to work there, we had somebody who was a big Republican. He used to make a Mishabera for Ronald Ben John, Ronald Reagan. So, it is what it is. I don't think so. I don't think so. Not that I know of. Very good. My pleasure. My pleasure.